Welcome. I am your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on social media at MMA LOTN. Joined by my guy, as always, John Stargarian. You guys can follow him at MMA Fox, as you see right there under his face. We are here propping you up for UFC London, which is headlined by a heavyweight fight between Alexander Volkov and Tom Aspinall. Big step up, big test for Mr. Aspinall, who seems to have a ton of steam and a ton of love behind him. John, this is one of those spots where we love to break it down and just try to bring people back to earth in terms of some hype that is coming on people. Not just the Aspinall side of things, right? There's a couple other guys on this card that have a ton of hype on their name. What is your first and foremost, welcome back. And secondly, what are your thoughts on this card from a fan's perspective?
Yeah, I'm pumped to talk about it. First of all, it's awesome we get an afternoon card on the East Coast.
Yes, 1 p.m. Eastern start time for the prelims, folks. Let's go.
Those are honestly my favorite. I can actually have dinner with my family, hang out. It's not
exactly.
like
Be a normal
especially if it's the worst is if it's a losing night and these cards end at 1 a.m. It's just like, oh, I go to bed just pissed off. It's like, at least if I lose money this weekend, I can actually go around, maybe a couple glasses of wine, sit down, hang out with my wife, and then go to bed not thinking about it as much.
Yep.
It's a cool card though, honestly. Like I don't know that it's the best card for betting ever. There's a couple spots I like, but it's exciting. I mean, the co-main and the main are great. Valiev sure is great, and then obviously there's a couple squash matches that seem to have been made explicitly to make the British fighters look good. So I'm excited to get into it though.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you brought up the time slot as well, though, because there's nothing that gets me more excited for a card when there's like 3 or 4 hours from the moment that you wake up to the time the card starts, and I fucking absolutely love that.
What was one of my most fun experiences with the card ever was that during the pandemic, that Fight Island card at 9 a.m. that they ran on a Wednesday.
Oh
Dude, it's so
yeah.
nice, man. Like the people don't get me wrong. I'm more than happy to watch UFC at 7 p.m., 8 p.m. every week. But in an ideal world, I would much prefer to watch it in the afternoon than I would at night,
No, I absolutely agree. And even the Wednesday card, like you brought up, that was fucking phenomenal as well.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that as well. Especially, I'm sure that a lot of people were working from home. So they probably had like a second screen setup where they're doing like their actual work and then they got the fights on the side as well. Exactly, working as well. I miss those like super early cards, like even several years ago. Remember when they used to do like the Singapore and Shanghai cards at like 8 a.m. Eastern time or 6 a.m.? Yeah, I fucking love those. I was all on board with all that stuff. But at 1 p.m. Eastern, we'll still take that. I don't mind that. Prime time for the London folks, and I can't wait to hear the ruckus crowd as well, because whenever we have shows over there, they're usually very much into it. Not to mention they got a ton of hometown guys to cheer for, so I'm sure it'll be loud as hell in there. All right, let's get this show on the road, though, because we got 12 fights to go through. We did lose one yesterday between Vince Morales and Nathaniel Wood. Word is they're trying to find a replacement for Nathaniel Wood. Seems like Davey Grant is the front runner, but that's just front runner based off of what we're seeing on social media. We don't know if they're actually talking contracts or anything like that. So Nathaniel Wood may be facing somebody this week. We just don't know who at this point in time. So we're going to have to skip that. So starting off the card, you want to talk about hype? You want to talk about prospects? We'll kick it right off the bat here with Muhammad Mokaev making his UFC debut, going up against Cody Durden. In terms of odds, we got minus 380 on Mokaev and plus 290 the return on Cody Durden. Mokaev, we've been hearing about this kid for a long time. The guy has a 23-0 amateur record, all within the span of I believe 5 years, just under 5 years, maybe 4.5 years. And then since then, he's been able to put together 5 wins or go 5-0 as a pro MMA fighter. He had 1 no contest, which was a low blow groin shot 2.5 minutes into the first round. So not much we can really take from that fight other than he likes to kick. That fight, he pretty much only threw kicks. One of them eventually landed to the nuts there of his opponent, and then obviously that ended the fight. But when he is at his best, it seems like he can get his grappling going. I'd say he has better jiu-jitsu than he has wrestling, which is why he's always able to kind of have these dominant positions, find these dominant positions, or even be ahead of his opponent in the scrambles, which is, I think, is going to be the kind of the difference maker here against Cody Durden. Durden on paper, maybe the better wrestler here. So I'm interested to see how Mokaev does dealing with a guy with a wrestling level of Cody Durden. But like I said, once this fight hits the mat, I think the BJJ of Mokaev is going to shine a little bit more than Durden, and his wrestling. The striking of Mokaev still seems like it needs a little bit of work. Seems like it's mainly a kicking game at this point in time. He shows good things with his striking, but we just haven't seen him rely on it heavily to go out there and get the win. More often than not, it's grappling based. There are a couple red flag fights for him. Obviously, the Hussein or Abdul Hussein fight, very back and forth fight, seemed like he was starting to drown a little bit. Although he did dig deep in that third round, always getting the pretty much the better of the transitions, allowing him to get the decision victory there. The Blaine O'Driscoll fight, a little bit of a red flag as well in terms of how difficult it seems for him to deal with pressure. But are we really expecting that type of pressure from Cody Durden this time around? Maybe from a wrestling perspective, sure. But like having to deal with wrestling and striking, I think will possibly be the downfall of Mokaev, especially from an aggressive fighter. So I do think that this is a good fight for him to get that dub, get his feet wet inside the UFC. But Cody Durden's not going to go away easily, and I don't think that this minus 380 line is justified in terms of how close this fight will actually be. I still think Mokaev will win, but I think it's going to be very close. I think it's going to be competitive throughout, which is why I like the overs here. Kind of surprised that it's actually a plus money. Fight goes to decision is plus 120 as well. I like that spot. I'm expecting back and forth grappling from both guys here, with Mokaev eventually getting his hand raised by decision. So like I said, fight goes to decision plus 120 like that, and Mokaev to win by decision at plus 225. I like that as well. How do you feel about this one, brother?
Yeah, to a lot of what you said, I don't know. Mokaev's obviously hyped. Obviously he's a Dagestani guy. 23 pro or amateur fights, as you mentioned. But I guess going into tape, I was kind of expecting something a little better. The guy is being talked about as this
Right?
virtuoso who is like the next like Peter Yan or whatever, like the next like great champion.
Khabib.
Yeah. And I honestly just don't really see it. Now, I will say, look, he's a very good athlete, but his game, like if you showed me a guy named Liam Neary from Scotland or Ireland, and you're like, here's this 21-year-old kid who's undefeated, I'd be like, oh, okay. He looks decent. He probably could be in the UFC in 4 or 5 years, maybe. Obviously, his name's Muhammad Mokaev, and he's hyped up, so everybody's talking about him being ready to contend. I don't really think that's the case. Look, I think he's pretty raw. Obviously, he's fast. He's a good athlete. He's a decent wrestler. He's got a good back take. I think his striking fundamentals are okay. They're a little shoddy defensively, I think. Kind of stuff that I expect him to probably clean up long term, to be honest. But I don't think he's really ready for the UFC, if I'm being completely honest. In terms of this matchup, it's weird because like Cody Durden is okay, right? I think Durden's the kind of guy, if you give him a guy that's at a grappling disadvantage, he can just mop the floor with. And even in the striking, I don't like rate his striking very highly, but he tends to be very aggressive. I certainly think in the grappling, as long as Durden's fresh, he can probably compete there. I really don't think like Mokaev's like wrestling is on that like even close to that kind of like top level Dagestani tier. Like I think it's closer to like average to above average in the UFC. But like I certainly don't think while they're fresh, he's going to be able to just dominate Durden in the grappling. I just don't really see that happening. And as you mentioned, we've seen issues in dealing with pressure. I kind of think Durden early in this fight, we know he's going to go forward and we know he's going to let his hands go. I actually think there's some room for Durden to have success early. The real problem is, as I think everybody knows, and every analysis this week is going to say, Cody Durden just doesn't really have a reliable gas tank. He just tends to go too hard. Now, maybe he learns. He's young enough. He can make adjustments. He can maybe fix some issues with his cardio or fix his pacing. But it's hard. The thing is, like, I would have interest in Durden. I just kind of feel like either Durden's going to push a pace and pressure him and probably gas out, or Mokaev's going to try to push a grappling pace and Durden may still gas out. So it's really hard for me to trust him down the stretch. But I think he can have success while he's fresh. So it's like, look, if the money line pushed out to like plus 350, plus 400, I'd probably take a stab. Something I think is interesting, though, I kind of like to go the distance here a decent bit. I hesitate to take a side with it just because I do think Durden can have success early. And it's like, well, if he wins the first round at a decent clip, we saw what happened in the Aori fight, his last fight. He managed to kind of just suck out a round, Valiev praying him at the end of that fight. And so I don't really want to take a side, but like, I think Durden's probably a much better submission grappler than just about everybody Mokaev's faced. And so I don't really think, I know Durden got subbed by Jimmy Flick, but that was I'm pretty sure we're not getting a flying triangle from Mokaev here, and I kind of think a tired Durden can probably hang on. We saw him dead tired with Chris Gutierrez, who's a fairly prolific finisher, and he managed to, make it through that fight. So, I mean, it's a 125-pound fight. Only like 35% of these end inside the distance, maybe even less than that. I don't think Mokaev's at all likely to put him outstanding, or Durden really likely to put him out. So, like, I kind of think Goes the Distance should be lined as like a decent favorite price here, and instead we're getting a dog price. So I like that spot a lot here.
Yeah, I honestly kind of overlooked the fight goes to decision. I had the over 2.5 in my best bets and props article, but then seeing it at plus money, I was just like, "Ooh, this might be interesting," because I expected to be a back and forth fight the way that you're saying. So, yeah, let's see how that one goes down. Very excited to see how the UFC career of Muhammad Mokaev starts to pan out here. All right. Let's move on to the next fight here. We got Elise Reed going up against Corey McKenna. In terms of odds, we got minus 265 on McKenna and plus 215 on Elise Reed. I was actually seeing on Pinnacle as well earlier today. McKenna's sitting at minus 285, and the return on Elise Reed was around plus 235. It's a wide line, man. I in my opinion, Corey McKenna, I think she's being a little bit overrated in this spot, right? Especially her wrestling, which that's kind of her go-to in most of her fights. But I feel as though it is more often not overrated. Now, if you just stack them up side by side, and you see Elise Reed, how many times she's been getting taken down and kind of dominated. Well, not dominated. I think she's only been dominated by Sijara Eubanks. But if you look at her last several fights where she has gotten takedowns or gotten taken down, she does a good job in terms of kind of nullifying the amount of damage her opponent does, which is why she's getting the decisions in the fights like the Jazz Duvicious fight or even the Jillian DeCourcy fight, where these opponents get the takedowns, but she does a good job in terms of kind of stifling their transitions and even getting back to her feet and then dishing out damage on the feet. She's a solid striker, Taekwondo background, karate background. You kind of see it in her stance. And I kind of think that's where Corey McKenna lacks is her striking. She has decent boxing, but I still think that she's going to get touched up from distance here, as McKenna will struggle to kind of close that distance. But it's either to close the distance there's only one reason she's going to close the distance, and more often than not, it's to grapple, is to try to get the takedown and drag this fight to the ground. I'm sure McKenna will land a couple takedowns. I'm just not completely sold on her ability to hold that position. You saw that fight against that Italian chick on the Cage Warriors scene, where she landed a couple takedowns in that fight, but had no success keeping that fight on the ground. And that other chick was able to win the fight just off of her striking damage alone. I could see this fight playing out similar to that, right? I think that we could see Elise Reed possibly find her way back to her feet and dish the damage with the striking and land some good shots. She has a great kicking game. She manages her distance decently well for somebody that has as bad takedown defense as she does. But you got to believe that she's improving that just as McKenna is improving her game as well. So for me, it's more so, is McKenna improving her top control enough? And is it going to showcase it here? Because if it doesn't, Reed will be able to get back to her feet and Reed will get back to her striking, which I think is where she has the advantage. So a couple ways I'd look to play this fight. McKenna via decision, if her top control is enough. I think it'll be enough for her to just grind it out over 15 minutes, which is minus 120 right now. But my tinfoil hat, prop here is Elise Reed via KO at plus 1100. If she gets off on the feet, she can have tremendous success, and she stopped a couple women just based off of volume and output and kind of overwhelming them on the feet with her strikes. One thing that was hilarious about her first ever fight in Bellator was, I forgot who it was. I think it was Josh Thompson or Big John McCarthy, who was saying, Elise Reed's landing a lot of these big shots, but they don't seem to have the most pop in them. And literally as he says that, she lands a beautiful body kick that visibly hurts Jessica Biggerman, I think her name was, whatever her name was. But it was hilarious, just a contradiction of like immediately of that happening. She does kick with some ill intentions. She doesn't have like crazy one punch knockout power or anything, but she's able to put together these accumulative strikes that I think could maybe wear on McKenna, especially if she's not having success with the grappling. If she's not having success with the takedowns, I think she could possibly get overwhelmed at a certain spot here. So not saying she's going to knock her out cold, but I think like a ground, like again, a standing TKO is absolutely possible here for Elise Reed at plus 1100. I'd have to take a little bit of a sprinkle. Official pick is Corey McKenna, though. Again, she has the hometown advantage, all that type of stuff. The takedowns, if she is able to keep them, she will more than likely be able to grind this fight out. So best prop would probably be McKenna via decision. But my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory here is Reed via KO at plus 1100. How do you feel about this one?
Interesting. I shouldn't say I'm passionate about it. I think Corey McKenna is kind of a bit of an unknown still. She's been off for about a year and a half. She's only 22 years old. She's been training a Team Alpha Male. So, I mean, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect we'll get some improvements for her. I guess my big issue with Corey McKenna, though, just in general, is she's very short and she's got a very short reach and she doesn't seem to be the most athletic, fighter in the world. But, I think she's an okay wrestler, and I think she's got a pretty good control game. Whereas on the other side, I actually think Reed's probably the better athlete here, but I don't think Reed is particularly skilled. She has – look, if they stay standing, Reed probably has the tools to outpoint her. It'll probably be competitive, and she can probably, win an output-based fight on the feet. I guess just my big issue is I think Reed's very easy to take down, and thus far – I haven't really seen a lot to show me that she has, much resistance to provide on the mat, and so it's like, can Reed get up? Maybe, and I get it. Corey McKenna is certainly not Tajara Eubanks. It's just like watching that, how easily Eubanks was able to pass, and seeing how okay McKenna has been in top position with much better grapplers and Elise Reed. It just makes me think, if McKenna gets her down, she's probably going to hold her there and pass and kind of do what she wants. But I don't really have a ton of interest in playing her up at minus 230 though. There's too many questions around McKenna. The athletic disadvantage kind of scares me, and she's too short. But I actually kind of think, if McKenna's going to pay this price off and be minus 230, it likely means she's on top a lot of this fight. And with that being the case, I kind of think McKenna ITD plus 300 is not a bad look. We know Reed's a girl who's going to give up position. And so presumably if McKenna actually is minus 230, she's going to get to dominant positions here. So I don't mind a pop there. I think McKenna plus 300 is decent to finish.
Shout out to our guy AG saying I can't make a good read, I guess. This fucking guy. I'm sure he's here all week, folks. Make sure you guys check him out. I get that. I'll also say this about Reed in the Sajara Eubanks fight. It seems as soon as the fight started, she goes, "Oh, I'm fucked. I'm fucked." Like, she doesn't even like move forward as soon as they start the fight. She kind of just waits for Sajara to come to her, and then Sajara just takes him down almost immediately.
That was
Go ahead.
The easiest minus 250 I've ever bet in my life.
But still, I'm hoping that we see more confidence from her this time around rather than thinking, oh, fuck, Sajara's coming. She's more than likely going to take me down. But we'll see how that goes. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got Jack Shore going up against Timur Valiev. In terms of odds, we currently have minus 115 on Valiev and minus 105 on Jack Shore. Crazy line movement on this fight throughout fight week. I believe Jack Shore opened up around plus 150, plus 160. A ton of money coming in, making him I wouldn't even be surprised if he's actually favored by the time this fight goes off, considering how much love I'm seeing out there for him. He's one of my favorite prospects, right? 15-0, very solid game, likes to go for takedowns, likes to drag this fight to the mat and just dominate his opponents from there. He hasn't been able to get a finish in his last couple fights here, but more often than not, we see him go down there and get the finish against his opponents. But we both know this. As level of competition starts to rise, it gets harder and harder to finish some of these guys. So I'd be surprised if he finishes Valiev. His striking game is still coming along pretty well, I think. It's improving. It's definitely not at the level of his grappling game, but I think that we're going to continue to see progress from it as he, gains more confidence inside the UFC and starts adding more names to his record as well. Valiev will easily be the toughest test to this point in time. We know Valiev's kind of his strength more often than not is his unorthodox striking style. Likes to throw a lot of spinning stuff, likes to throw some flashy stuff. He usually controls his opponents a lot just in the striking alone, right? He does a very good job in terms of maintaining distance. And then he's shown that he can rely on his grappling if he needs it, right? In the Martin Day fight, he lands 5 takedowns. I think he got almost 11 minutes of control time in that fight as well. But that was, I think, more so of a statement to be like, hey, I know I got knocked out in my last fight against Trevin Jones. Let me just play this as safe as possible, not risk getting knocked out or anything like that. Let me get a W, and then I'll go back to being myself, which he was in the Hani Barcelos fight, where he was able to knock down Barcelos a couple times there. I think he dropped the second round, but outside of that, he looked pretty good. It could also be due to Hani Barcelos not throwing as much, but you also have to factor in that Valiev does a really good job in terms of moving, staying out of range from his opponents, making it harder for them to get their own offense off. But I do think Jack Shore is one of the best in terms of kind of corralling his opponents in certain situations and just dragging them to the mat. And I think it's just a matter of time before he gets his hands on Valiev and starts to drag him down, or even kind of has some success in that clinch position up against the cage. He's big, he's strong for this weight class as well, and I think it's going to show here against Valiev. I'd be, like I said, I'd be surprised if he gets the finish. I'd be surprised if both guys get the finish actually here, because Valiev, decent striker, but I think that we've seen great durability from Jack Shore in many fights in the past, and I'd be surprised if Valiev is going to be the first person to knock him out, which is kind of why, the fight goes to decision. I'm looking at it now. Actually, it's minus 225, a little bit chalky for two guys that are, more often not going out there and finishing their opponents. I think that's a little bit too juiced, but I believe in the durability of both guys here, thinking that they'll be able to make it through the full 15 minutes. I will lean with the Jack Shore side of things. I do think he'll be able to get the takedowns and control time, and I think that'll be more than enough for him to get the judges' nod. So Jack Shore by decision, plus 165. I'm seeing plus 200s at certain spots. Sign me up for that. And then on the flip side, I'd say you could do the same thing for Valiev by decision around plus 150, plus 165 as well. So I'm going Shore. I feel like you're going to have a different take on this one. Please do let us know.
Yeah, I like Valiev here, to be honest. It's funny. I initially saw the line drop, and I hadn't looked that closely at it. I thought it was like minus 150. In my head, I was like, that's probably where it should be for Valiev. And then obviously it's come in quite a bit. So I taped it pretty aggressively the other night. Honestly, I like Jack Shore generally, because look, you want a guy that's going to come out there and maximize his chance to win fights. And, Shore's going to put out output on the feet. He's going to attempt a lot of takedowns. And, those are just two things that are going to help you win rounds. Obviously, he's a dangerous grappler. But, you look at the guys that Shore's been fighting, both regionally and now in the UFC. It's like Aaron Phillips, Noah Hernandez, Ludovic Shalinian. The only, great win for him is, and that's not even great, good, decent win is Hunter Azure. And that fight was pretty concerning to me in a lot of respects. He kind of struggled to control Azure in that fight. He got reversed a few times. He lost the striking in that fight. That went to a split decision. And, Azure is a guy that we've seen held on the fence by Brad Katona. We've seen him have his back taken a couple times in the UFC. And the fact that Shore, until Azure gassed out, really kind of struggled to get to dominant positions really just made me kind of think he was probably hitting an athleticism wall. And now he fights Timur Valiev, who I think is better than Hunter Azure at just about everything. First of all, we're going to be back in a big cage, which seems kind of important. And unlike Azure and most of the other guys Shore fought, Valiev actually uses the cage quite well. His movement's quite good. He fights on the back foot very, very well. But then in the grappling, it's just like, look, Valiev's got very, very good takedown defense. When he's gotten taken down in the past, he historically hasn't accepted bottom position much. He does a pretty good job of creating space and working up. And I just kind of think, if Azure was able to, easily work up and even get to, top position at times, I kind of expect Valiev to outperform Azure fairly easily in the grappling. I think he's a better wrestler than Azure is. I think he's a better defensive grappler than Azure is. And as I mentioned, I think he's a much better striker. I think he's got a pretty substantial striking advantage here. I actually think he can have some grappling success himself in this spot. So I like Valiev here. I think, 60% or so is about right, that minus 150 mark. And I think in terms of the fight, if you're going to play a prop, I'd be surprised if Valiev finished him. I think Azure's a bigger hitter than he is, and he didn't really hurt Shore that much. So yeah, I like Valiev by decision here. I think he can get it up to plus 165 in spots. But yeah, Valiev by decision. That's how I'm looking to play this.
I like it. I like that take. Again, there's a lot of love on Jack Shore this weekend, and that's obviously represented by the crazy line movement that we're seeing here. Not a lot of people I'm hearing and seeing on the Valiev side, so I'm glad that we got that perspective as well. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. Nikita Krylov going up against Paul Craig. In terms of odds, we got -200 on Krylov, +170 the return on Paul Craig. Interesting fight here, right? Most often, these guys don't like going to the decision, which currently sits at -200 right now. Fight doesn't go to decision. Before the 3-fight decision streak that Nikita Krylov is on, he had 32 fights that did not go the distance, which is a crazy stat to consider, especially with that volume of fights. On the flip side, for Paul Craig, the only time he's been to a decision was against Shogun Rua the first time, where they went to a draw. But he put a stamp on that in the rematch, where he made my guy Shogun tap to strikes. And that was probably the saddest moment in MMA history for me, to see my guy Shogun Rua go out like that against a guy like the Bear Jew. But interesting fight here, right? Pretty easy to break down in terms of Krylov. If he's smart, he's not going to go for takedowns, something that he's been historically doing over the last several fights. If he wants to keep this in the striking, more than likely he's the better striker, has more power in the striking as well. Where on the flip side for Paul Craig, he doesn't mind striking, but like his technical striking needs some work. It's more so the aggressiveness that allows him to be successful in those striking exchanges at times. But the end goal is clear here. He wants to get the fight to the ground. He wants to use his jiu-jitsu. And I said this in my own breakdown for the MMA Lawcast I dropped the other day. You don't see, finishes from bottom as often in men's MMA, with the exception of Paul Craig. Paul Craig loves throwing up submissions off his back, and more often than not, he gets them. He got my guy Magomed Ankalaev. He got Gadzmurad Antigulov. He got Jamal Hill the last time around. Like, he just keeps getting these guys because he's so sneaky with his setups, with his triangle, and with his armbar and all that. It's women's MMA where we see the armbar from guard more often than not men's MMA. But Paul Craig is the exception to that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that here, right? Out of the, how many losses does my guy have here? Out of the 8 losses on Nikita Krylov's record, I believe 4 of them have been, 5 of them have been via submission. That's not, confidence building at all, if you like the Nikita Krylov side here at all. Shout out to the people that got in early on Krylov. I believe he was a slight plus money on the opener, maybe -130 for a little time. And now that line is just absolutely skyrocketed to -200. But I honestly want nothing to do with this fight, because I could see the fight doesn't go to decision busting in your face as well, right? Man, that sounded disgusting as hell, but you guys know what the fuck I mean. We could see Krylov taking maybe more so of a point fighting approach, where he kind of just stays on the outside, tries to nullify the takedown attempts of Paul Craig by keeping him on the outside with the jab or his kicks or anything like that. And then on the flip side for Paul Craig, if he gets a takedown, what if he's thinking, let's go position over submission at this point in time? Just try to keep Krylov on the ground, and maybe a submission will eventually open itself up. But if it doesn't, I'm just going to continue to control him here. And before we know it, 15 minutes have passed by. So that's a little bit of a concern for me, which is why I'm not the highest on the fight. Doesn't go to decision as much anymore. But if we're looking at props, right, you could look at Krylov via decision. That's sitting at +350. Paul Craig by submission +450. Not too bad of a stab there, in my opinion, because of Paul Craig's kind of MO whenever he goes out there and fights, and obviously the amount of losses that Krylov has had via submission. But yeah, I don't feel too good about this fight from any perspective, money line, props, or anything. I just want to sit back and watch this car crash, man. I think that's where it's going to be, whether it's over 15 minutes or a quick car crash that ends in less than a round. We'll see how it goes down. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so fun little story. Like, obviously growing up, my dad wasn't an MMA guy, he's a big baseball guy. So him and I chat baseball all the time. We bond over baseball. And I have a 2-year-old son, and I'm hoping as he grows up, him and I will bond over MMA. My dad used to share with me all the history of baseball, and I Wikipedia stuff and look it up. It's going to be interesting in 10 years having to explain to my son that Paul Craig, the guy who subbed Jamal Hill and Magomed Ankalaev, wasn't that good. Trust me, he wasn't that good. It's just so. Paul Craig has had some career, man. Like this is like the upper 1% of outcomes you could have possibly had, like subbing Ankalaev and Hill.
Good God.
But it's interesting because I agree with pretty much everything you said. On paper, Krylov has the tools to be minus 400 here, right? He
Yeah.
should be the better grappler, really. He's definitely the better striker. But like, I wanted to bet Krylov, to be honest. And then I'm like taping it, and it's like the guy gets himself in so many messy scrambles that, like, Paul Craig is like the Joker in Batman. He's an agent of chaos, man. And Krylov is happy to accept the chaos. And I don't really want to have money at juice on Nikita Krylov if he's in there just obliging Craig in like messy grappling exchanges, But with that said, it's interesting. You touched on, the Krylovs had 31 fight, or his first like 31 or 32 fights all didn't go the distance. It's honestly kind of hard to figure out how. Like, he doesn't really have what I'd really classify as like a hard ITD fighting style. He's not like a guy who's going to bite the mouthpiece and go swing in the pocket with you. That's not really his MO. He's really more of a on the feet, almost like an outside karate guy, really. Obviously, he will force grappling and stuff, and I think, obviously that's probably why he's got so many finishes. He'll force guys to either get submitted or he'll get submitted. But, in this matchup, I honestly think the best way to look at it is I like the goes the distance here. I kind of like the Krylov by decision because Craig's a really difficult guy to sub, man. Like, he's only been – actually, I don't think he's been subbed – no, he's been subbed one time in his career, and it was a third-round Kimura by Jimmy Crute. But, like, Craig does a pretty good job with guard retention. He tends to just be constantly attacking off him. I don't really think Krylov is likely to really try to aggressively pass if he is on the ground here, if he's smart at least. And on the feet, like I said, I think Krylov just probably plays an outside game and outpoints him there pretty easily. So, yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, it could finish. Craig could catch a sub, or maybe he gets head kicked, or, Krylov gets a dominant position at some point. But I kind of just think, while they're standing, Krylov's going to dictate where this fight takes place, whether it's on the mat or on the feet. And on the feet, I just don't think it's a super high percentage to finish. And even on the mat, I sort of think more of the finishing upsides on the Craig side of things on the mat. So, and I don't think it's super likely he subs Krylov. So I like goes the distance at dog money. Like, I'd probably have that like 55%, to be honest. And in terms of like, personal props, like I think Krylov by decision, especially if you have one of those books of plus 300, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to kind of be questioning your approach on that one, considering the history of these guys.
Yeah,
and how many times they haven't seen the judges' scorecards. But I see it, man. Styles obviously makes fights, and this could absolutely be those ones where Krylov just doesn't want to overextend too much and fear getting taken down. Because again, maybe he had some flashbacks to the 5 submission losses he has on his record. Like, oh God, this motherfucker's on top of me. I might just give up a choke or some shit. But yeah, looking forward to seeing how this one plays out. Hopefully, it's a fun fight, at least from an entertainment perspective. All right. Let's get this fight or get this card moving along here. Next up, we got Shamil Abdurakhimov going up against Sergey Pavlovic. In terms of odds, we got minus 310 on Pavlovic, plus 245 to return on Shamil Abdurakhimov. Now, both these guys have been out of the cage for a long time. I believe end of 2019 was pretty much the last time we saw both of these guys. And now I'm looking forward to seeing how, more than likely how Shamil comes back looking, because he's cracking 40 years old at this point in time. But I remember not too long ago where this guy used to be heavy chalk whenever you used to go bet him. And now all of a sudden he's plus 245 against a relatively unproven heavyweight prospect here in Sergey Pavlovic. Now, Pavlovic obviously fell flat in his UFC debut against Alistair Overeem, where he got pounded to shit on the ground by Overeem. I believe that was the first fight for Overeem, training with Curtis Blades, who had recently done the same thing to him 2 fights ago. But since then, Sergey Pavlovic has come back and knocked out Marcelo Gome in a minute, and then he knocked out Maurice Green in 2 minutes. Not too much we can really take away from those fights, because if Abdurakhimov's chin holds up here, which obviously it has not over the last 2 fights, but can you blame him against Curtis Blades and Chris Daukaus, who has that crazy hand speed? Can we say that Sergey Pavlovic has the same thing here? You're pretty much banking on him to go out there and knock out Shamil Abdurakhimov in round 1, because if he doesn't, Shamil could make this thing sticky, man. It wasn't too long ago that he's beating Andrei Arlovsky over 15 minutes, something that Arlovsky does very well in terms of putting out output, putting out, good scoring for the judges, which is why Arlovsky more often than not is able to get the judges' scorecards more at this point in his career. But Shamil did a really good job in terms of tying him up against the cage, landing some good strikes of his own, landing takedowns when he needed as well. And he could do that here against Sergey Pavlovich too, right? Outside of those quick knockouts, there's not much that Sergey Pavlovich brings to the table. With that said, like, I'm just not willing to go out there and shell out money to back a guy in Shamil Abdurakhimov who could be absolutely falling off a cliff at this point in time. We know heavyweights, though. You can go later into your 40s and still have some success, or at least into your early to mid 40s and still have success. But this Sergey Pavlovich guy, it seems like if he has really found his confidence in his striking, because early in his career it didn't really seem like that, but now he's really throwing with some intention, throwing with some speed, and if he's able to catch Abdurakhimov, I think he could put his lights out. But I'm just not counting on it. I'm really not counting on it, especially at this money line price tag. So that's why we bet props. Sergey Pavlovich, even by KO, is sitting at -200, which is crazy to me. We don't see that often. That is absolutely crazy that line is there. Pavlovich inside the distance, -225. But if you truly think Pavlovich gets it done at a pretty high clip early, taking the under 1.5 is probably the easiest or the best way to go here, which is currently sitting at -150. Because if it starts to creep over that 1 round mark, then I think things start to get a little bit shaky for Pavlovich, because that means that Abdurakhimov is more than likely having some success too. Abdurakhimov by decision is +600. That is an insane line, considering I think that he has the more tools to win a fight via decision in this spot than what Pavlovich brings. So two ways to go about it, in my opinion. You either take the 1.5 and bank on Pavlovich getting that early knockout, or you can hedge off a little bit with Abdurakhimov to win by decision at +600, which I think is a absurd number, considering he probably has the better tools to win this fight via decision. Do you agree with that? And then ultimately, who do you think wins this fight?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, without the Abdurakhimov like knockout against Daukaus a couple months ago, like, I'd probably be betting him here. Like, I pretty much completely agree with your take on Pavlovich. I don't really think Pavlovich as an MMA fighter really brings a whole lot to the table. He's just a very big hitter and he's kind of athletic, The problem for me is it's just like Shamil's 41 years old. He didn't fight for 2 years before that, got viciously knocked out by Daukaus. Now he's turning around 6 months later. And first of all, I think it's kind of weird that, he took all that time off at his age, then gets knocked out, now turning around. Like, he's just trying to fight out his contract and get his paychecks. Like, I don't really know. What I will say is, though, I actually thought Abdurakhimov looked up pretty good against Daukaus before he got hurt bad at the end of round 1. He was winning most of the striking exchanges earlier in that fight, and I actually think Daukaus, he's got faster hands than Pavlovich for sure. I actually think Daukaus is probably a better fighter than Pavlovich is. I kind of think if you're betting the fight on a money line perspective, you obviously have to bet Abdurakhimov here. Laying -300 on Pavlovich is crazy talk. And kind of like you said, like, even looking at Pavlovich's props here, because, like, I'll be honest, like, I really do think it's the kind of that Abdurakhimov is going to get knocked out. I really don't like these turning around like this at this age to fight a guy that moves like Pavlovich, that hits like Pavlovich does. But, like, Pavlovich KO is like -2 or is -200. Pavlovich round 1 is even money. Like, I'm not betting a round 1 at even money. Are you kidding me? Like, if you're betting round 1s at even money, you're fucking donating. Like, that is what you're doing. So it's just like, I look at this and I'm like, well, what? My favorite prop for the fight is honestly probably Abdurakhimov by decision, like +600. Like, if he wins, like, if he gets out of the first 7 minutes, he's probably going to win the fight, and it's probably going to be by decision. It's just a question of how often does Pavlovich put his lights out. But, like, you nailed it. Like Abdurakhimov is the better fighter. There was once upon a time, this was a guy that was always chalk, and honestly, historically speaking, he's a guy who's always been known as being very durable for heavyweight too, right? So it's like, yeah, I'm probably not going to bet him on the money line, but honestly, +600 to win a decision here, that's kind of crazy. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I do like that approach here as well. I did misspeak there earlier in terms of the last time we saw Abdurakhimov inside the cage. He last fought in September of 2021, where he got knocked out by Daukaus. But before that was the end of 2019, because he had like 4 or 5 fights fall out between 2019 and the time that he stepped in against Daukaus. So I apologize for that. But yeah, it's just a matter of, will Shamil's chin hold up? And if it does, his decision line is absolutely crazy here. I might just take a degenerate sprinkle on it, because +600 is just crazy, considering he's the better
like $20 on it. Take the wife out for dinner after it hits.
Exactly. There you go. All right, let's keep this thing moving along. I believe it is the prelim headliner now. A grappler's delight between Mike Grundy and Makwan Amirkhani. In terms of odds, we currently have minus 190 on Grundy and plus 160 the return on Makwan Amirkhani. Now, this line actually opened up as a pick'em, got immediate steam on Mike Grundy, bringing him down to minus 135. But over the last couple of days, we've been getting nothing but Mike Grundy love on the betting line. And I got to say, I kind of understand it. It might be getting a little bit crazy at this point in time, getting up to that minus 200 range, but I still do think he should be the one that's favored. Maybe minus 130 was closer to a more accurate betting line here because, man, Makwan, 3-fight losing streak, it just does not look the greatest. He had a great first round against Lerone Murphy, though. Like, that was very impressive where he was able to ground him and just hold him. But then it seemed like he was just a little bit too desperate for that takedown in round 2, and he got caught by a beautiful knee by Lerone Murphy after he faked a jab. And then he brought up the knee knowing that Makwan was going to kind of duck under that jab, go for a takedown, and he paid the price for it. But that's when Makwan is best, right? When he's able to drag fights to the ground. He has a crazy Anaconda series, does a very good job in terms of his chokes, looks for the finish more often than not. But when he's not able to get to finish and he's required to go the full 15 minutes, his gas tank just does not look the greatest. He doesn't really manage his gas tank the best. The same could kind of be said about Mike Grundy, but the Movsar Evloev fight, when you have a choke that tight, you think more often than not you're putting your opponent out. But Movsar Evloev is just built differently, and he was able to survive that early onslaught from Mike Grundy. Even with Mike looking like he was a little bit gassed after that first round, he still landed, I believe, 3 or 4 takedowns of Movsar Evloev in rounds 2 and round 3, and then from there, obviously he was just not able to do enough and get enough control time, which is where Movsar was able to pull away in terms of the striking and landing the more damaging blows on the feet. The Lando Venata fight, the guy shot 20 takedowns. That is insane in terms of the amount of takedowns you're able to shoot. He only landed 3 of them. But Lando Venata, underrated wrestler, did a good job in terms of keeping that fight on the feet. And then on the feet, he was a much better striker, much more versatile, much more diverse, and had way more output than what Mike Grundy was doing that night. Now, if Grundy can secure takedowns on Makwan Amirkhani, I'd be surprised if he actually goes for takedowns early in this fight. I think if he tried to control it with his power striking style on the feet, he could wear on Makwan Amirkhani and then maybe go to the grappling later on in this fight. But I feel like their grappling is going to cancel each other out early here. And then the longer that this fight goes, I'm going to be leaning on Mike Grundy a little bit more in terms of just, like I said, controlling the fight with his power punching. And I think he could eventually actually find that chin of Makwan Amirkhani and put him out. Grundy hits pretty fucking hard, as we've seen in the past. And I think that he could absolutely do that here against Amirkhani. Crazy to me that Grundy KO is at plus 750 because I think that's very live in this spot. And I'd even sprinkle the round 3 a little bit here, which is currently sitting around plus 1400. So Grundy's the pick. Grundy by KO plus 750. Take my money and sprinkle that round 3 as well. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more or less in the same boat as you here. It's funny because there's a part of me that when this line came out, I was like, man, Makwan as a dog, the guy's fought much better. Well, he shouldn't say he's fought better competition, but he's had success against better competition than Mike Grundy has. What has Mike Grundy really done in the UFC? He knocked out Nad Narimani, but he's not really a power puncher. It's not really historically been the way he gets guys out of there. But at the same time, you just nailed it. I dug a little deeper, and it's Grundy attempted 20 takedowns against Lando Venata. It's Makwan Amirkhani would have a heart attack if he attempted 20 takedowns in a fight. And granted, Grundy doesn't have great cardio either, but the fact that he's got that much, I guess the best way to put it, and I'm not normally a narrative guy like this, I just think Grundy's got more fight in him than Amirkhani does, to be honest.
I know what you mean by that. That seems like a noobish take. I know what you mean. He has more fight in his eyes or some shit like that. He's the more mentally prepared guy at this point in time. But no, I completely agree with you.
When things go south for Makwan Amirkhani, he just panics and everything goes to shit. Grundy, he is getting up from every takedown. He's stuffing takedowns, piecing him up, and Grundy doesn't care. He just bites the mouthpiece and keeps coming forward and trying to take him down. Same thing in the Venata fight. It's I know Grundy, if things get dicey, is going to continue to try to work his game plan, whether that's strike or take Makwan down. Whereas if Makwan cannot control this fight at his pace where he wants it to be, he's probably going to break because that's what he does. Makwan's fun. I like him. He's a fun, ridiculous personality. But unfortunately, the guy just does not deal with adversity very well. It's just been the reality. Whereas Grundy deals with it okay. And I think skill-wise, they're probably on a similar level. But Grundy's a bit more proactive in what he does, whereas Makwan tends to fade precipitously after a round. So I lean Grundy. I think the line could be a tad wide, but I just, I bet Makwan against Lerone Murphy, and I'm just done after that. Like never again. I'm done. I'm done like visiting the Makwan Amirkhani dog shelter, as they say. In terms of props, it's kind of a weird fight, right? I think I lean towards goes the distance here. It's minus 180, and I think I lean towards Grundy decision. Grundy decision right now, it's sitting there. Plus 150 is the best number on it, it looks like. But I don't think that's bad. And it's like Amirkhani is not a guy who we're seeing get subbed on the mat, when he's been out grappled, really. And we even tried the Kamala Kirk fight. He was completely gassed out at the end of that fight, but he actually was able to maintain his full guard and not let Kirk really pass or do any damage towards the end of that fight. And I kind of think, because it's kind of a similar dynamic, right? Like if they get into the second or third round, Grundy's probably going to be tired too. So I kind of think Makwan's pretty likely to survive on bottom. So my lead would be goes the distance, which is a little chalky, but like I don't really think Grundy's going to get subbed either here. Like Makwan really only threatens with that anaconda. He doesn't really have many other submissions to go to other than the front choke series. And yeah, I like goes the distance. I like Grundy by decision.
Yeah, I do think the only finish that we'll see here is likely the Grundy KO. But outside of that, yeah, I do agree that this will likely go to 50 minutes with a back and forth grappling fight with Grundy starting to pull away the further that this fight goes. All right, that is a wrap on the prelims. Shout out to the 90 of you currently chilling with us on this Thursday afternoon. Make sure you guys follow my guy John over there at MMA Fox on Twitter. Make sure you guys check out his Club and Sub podcast as well. Link to that channel is in the description below. And if you guys haven't already, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe on this video as well. All right, let's get to the main card and kicking things off. More hype throughout the card. We got my guy Ilia Topuria coming in at minus 590 now. The return on Jai Herbert plus 425. Personally, we talked about this a little bit before we went live. I told you to hold on to your thoughts so that we can talk about it a little bit more live on the show with the guys here. But I feel like this is one of those run over spots for Ilia Topuria. Obviously, we know he had that whole debacle in January where he was supposed to fight Evloev. Evloev pulls out with COVID. In steps Charles Jourdain. During that time, you get that the Rata video from Topuria talking shit about Evloev. And lo and behold, Topuria has to pull out on weigh-in day because he can't make the weight down to 145 pounds. But seems like he wants to right that wrong right away, right? A month and a half later, here he is at UFC London going up, UFC London going up a weight class to fight Jai Herbert and try to wipe that bad taste out of his mouth. I think this is a run over spot for him where he can get Jai Herbert to the ground, and from there he should be able to do work and possibly find a quick finish here. Now, I get it. Jai Herbert's huge. He's 6'1". I think Topuria is like 5'6" or 5'7". In some fights, I think size advantages and all that come into play. But in this particular fight, I just don't think so. I don't see the takedown defense necessary from Jai Herbert to keep this fight standing, which is where he'll likely have more than enough success. I think Topuria's striking game is still coming along a little bit. He has good knockout power, obviously, as we've seen over his last couple fights. But where he gets his best work done is dragging fights to the ground and using his jiu-jitsu to try to lock up a choke or get dominant position and get a ground and pound finish. I get it. I get the angle that Renato Moicano took a round and a half to submit and finish Jai Herbert. So that's probably what's going to happen here, right? But we know it doesn't. That's not how MMA math works. That's not how things usually go down. Perfect example that I can think of just off the top of my head. Guido Canetti goes out there and knocks out Chris Moutinho in less than a round, where it took Sean O'Malley, 2.5 rounds, almost 3 full rounds to knock out Chris Moutinho. So shit just happens at times. Sometimes submission opportunities open themselves up. Sometimes knockout opportunities open themselves up. And it may not be as long as it took last time. It may not be as quickly as it was the other time. So with Topuria, I feel like this guy, another kind of noobish take, like you kind of brought up from the Grundy and Amirkhani fight. He has something to prove here. He wants to right that wrong of what happened in January. He wants to go out there. That's why he took this fight as quickly as he did. He goes to get me in there ASAP. Let me steamroll this guy and let me get back to work at 145 pounds. I don't think that this is a long-term thing for him at 155 pounds, because obviously we'll see that he's going to be outsized here. And once he starts going up against better and better competition, it's going to be harder for him to implement that grapple heavy attack. But this is fucking Jai Herbert. This guy's going to get taken down. This guy's going to get smashed on the mat, and this fight's going to be done within a round, in my opinion. So I'm not paying minus 590 on Topuria, but under 1.5, minus 140, minus 150. I don't mind that. Fight won't start round 2, minus 105. Give me some of that. Topuria by KO plus 175. Topuria by sub plus 100. Topuria inside the distance is minus 280. Like, I would never advise anybody betting that heavy of a chalk on an inside the distance, but I think he gets this fucking done ASAP. I don't think he has much issue with Jai Herbert. If your sole reasoning as to why Topuria will struggle to finish Herbert here is because of the Moicano fight, I feel like I have explained it perfectly that sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it doesn't. Just look at my guy, Chris Moutinho from the other week. How do you see this one going down, John?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to make an impassioned case for Jai Herbert here. I do think to some extent the hype on Topuria is getting a little out of hand, though. Like, if you actually contextualize what we've seen, like he goes out there in his debut, dominates Yusuf Salah, but he gasses bad down the stretch in that fight. Granted, it was short notice, but still, that's the only really time we've seen him be extended in the UFC. Knocks out Damon Jackson in 2 minutes. And then, fights Ryan Hall, basically just fights intelligently, doesn't go into his guard and knocks him out with hammer fist. Look, all of that's really impressive. But he's being treated like he's like a top 5 guy already. And I just don't really think there's a whole lot there to suggest that that's actually the case, to be honest. And by the way, I'm not saying he's fraud either. I'm just saying, we basically have a sample of him fighting no ones on the Spanish regional scene. And then this particular set of fights where it's like Zalal is not probably not UFC caliber, if we're being honest. Damon Jackson, he knocked him out so fast, it's hard to take anything from that.
Hold on. I'd say Zalal is UFC caliber. Maybe
is
not. I'd say so.
Look, he got a couple of dubs.
He's gotten a couple dubs. I think I don't think he's like top 20 or top 25 or anything like that. But I think he could still wipe the floor with guys that actually don't deserve to be in the UFC.
Maybe, but it's like Zalal also got blanketed for 15 minutes by Jose Mariscal 2 fights before he came to the UFC. And it's like my larger point being what we know about Topuria, the data that we know is that he will try to grapple. He's got a great front choke series and he hits pretty hard. Everything else is an unknown. Zalal actually had some, if he didn't keep trying to throw flying knees at him, he would have never gotten taken down as easily in that fight. He had some standing success when they were at range. So I think Topuria's striking is a bit of an unknown. I mean, I'd favor Herbert comfortably there, I think, to be honest. His grappling, look, obviously he's a very dangerous submission grappler. My big question is really his wrestling, because I haven't really seen him get resistance there. It's mostly just single entry double legs where he's just getting the takedown immediately, not having to work. Can Herbert stop that? I don't really know. He did okay against the doubles with Moicano, and then Moicano would just lock the body lock and trip him with really no problem at all. I just don't think Herbert has very good balance here, so I'm inclined to think he probably can't keep it standing, and if he can't keep it standing, well, then it probably goes downhill fast. Haven't really seen Herbert deal with a front choke before. I'm guessing it's probably not good based on the rest of his grappling. But again, if it turns out he can fight hands and extend this fight, who really knows? I'll be honest, I hate the fact that Topuria is going up to 55. The guy's 5'7" with a shorter reach than Aljamain Sterling. Why are you making this move?
Well,
but
short notice. He just wants to just get in there, get a win, get back down to 45, I think.
All I'm saying is it's very weird to me that the guy struggled to make 45 with his frame and now is coming in there at 55. I don't like it at all. But the bottom line is they're also making this fight for Topuria. That's just, right off the bat here, you have to just understand, this is the UFC saying, okay, we like this kid. We want to hype him. He's going to meeting Dana White in Vegas and taking photos with him. They're trying to get him to get in here, get a quick submission, make this look good and get out of there. And honestly, I think that's probably what's going to happen here. He's going to probably go in there. Look, like I said, I have some questions about his wrestling. I just, I just don't think Jai Herbert's the guy. Between the fact that one takedown could be the fight and the fact that Herbert just doesn't really seem to have balance, he's probably pretty limited to needing to hurt him early. Maybe if he can survive as long as he did against Moicano, something could change. But Topuria slowed down against Zalal, but it took 12 minutes for that to happen. And I don't really think Herbert's likely to provide the resistance on the mat Zalal provided. I think Topuria is going to run through him and sub him. It's clearly what the UFC wants. They gave him pretty much a perfect candidate. If he doesn't go and dominate Jai Herbert, I'm not really sure where he goes from here, to be honest. But like in terms of the props, it's just like, look, I probably would have bet Topuria at minus 300 down there. Minus 500, no interest. Like you said, it's like what, minus 280 ends to win inside the distance. That's not very intriguing. KO is not very intriguing because if he's doing what he should be doing, he's not going to be KOing him, And even money on sub, not really. Like, I guess what I would go with here is probably the under. Even that's like not that sexy at minus 150, the under 1.5. But Topuria actually looking dominant here is probably contingent on a fast sub. And the bottom line is it probably factors in a lot of Herbert's win equity too, which is probably a quick KO. So yeah, I guess under is the best way to play it. I don't think there's much here that I'd recommend people put money on though.
Also, can we, have a talk with Jai Herbert's management? How are you going to get this guy to fight Renato Moicano and Ilia Topuria within 3 fights? Chill.
Off the biggest win of his career, too.
Exactly.
Right? Oh, great. You knocked out Cabo. You're feeling good. Now go fight Ilia Topuria in front of you, in your home country. Like, of all places. Every other insane. Brit on here has got, well, not every other one, but most of the other British fighters on here have gotten at least stylistic matchups that favor them, Instead, they give Jai Herbert Ilia Topuria.
Maybe he wants to continue to contribute to his folklore, right? Like the guy just goes out there, he's like, "Oh, he fought Ilia Topuria and Renato Moicano within the span of a year." Even though he didn't get his hand raised.
He knocks out Ilia Topuria.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be a great story if he does actually get the win. Herbert by KO is plus 700 for anybody that's interested, as well as Herbert by decision in case he does manage to get up and get his striking going, but not knock him out, plus 1100. But come on, like. I don't know, John. Next week, if we come back to the show and Herbert's coming off a win from Topuria, I don't know what the fuck we're going to be doing.
Well, I'll tell you what. The best outcome here, for being honest, is Herbert to get subbed in 30 seconds and Topuria to be minus 200 against Valiev. That's what I'm rooting for. That's what I'm rooting for.
I hope they make that match again.
Me too. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, they got to do that. I know Valiev has Dan Ige coming up, so if he gets that Ige win, I'd be surprised if he actually wants that Topuria fight, considering he'll be so far up the rankings compared to him. But I hope they match up once at a later date.
Topuria 55 can't be a permanent thing, right? Like who is he competing at in you're going to tell me Topuria is going to go in there and compete with guys like Arman Tsarukyan? No.
145, that will be his home. At least what I think it is. Again, I think this is more, to be his home. Yeah, I think this is more circumstantial than anything, but we'll see how it goes this week, and hopefully he can get back past. What is it? What's Jai Herbert's nickname? The Black
Country Banger Badger.
Yeah, the Black Country Banger. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Whatever that means, my man. All right, let's move on to the next one here. We got Molly Meatball McCann, talking about nicknames, going up against Luana Dread Carolina. In terms of odds, we got minus 140 now on Molly McCann, plus 120 the return on Luana Carolina. Now, seeing a lot more love out there for Carolina than I thought I would. Notoriously or historically speaking, a lot of people haven't really been the highest on her. But she goes out there, gets an underdog win against Lupi Godinez, who came in on 6 days' notice, fighting the weekend before, going up a weight class against a much bigger opponent. That's where we see size come into play, which is hilarious that we're talking about it right after the Topuria fight here. But that's where size matters, right? We saw Lupi really struggle to get Carolina to the ground, and I think size had a lot to do with that as well. Carolina is a big woman for this weight class, right? She's missed weight a couple times at this weight class as well, so I don't blame Lupi for not getting the fight to the ground, and that's kind of what was the downfall from her. She was struggling to get the takedowns, and then on the feet, Carolina was just able to implement her range, her striking, and even just use her own size against her in these clinch positions and get the better of her in that spot. We're talking about a 5'2" a 5'2" Lupi Godinez going up against a 5'6" Luana Carolina. Now we're getting Molly McCann, 5'4", not the biggest herself, but she is quite strong. She showcased it in other fights. But I think that this is a great matchup for her, honestly. I do think that this is going to look similar to the Ji Yoon Kim fight, where we see Kim kind of just sniper from the outside or try to sniper from the outside. But Molly does such a good job in terms of crashing the pocket with her strikes, getting some shots off. And sometimes she goes for takedowns off of those strikes, or sometimes she just backs back off and just rinses and repeats with that striking style that she has. She put up, I believe, 127 significant strikes against Ji Yoon Kim. She may not hit 120 this time around, but I do think she'll get over that 100 mark here by just, again, rinse and repeating that crash pocket style of, again, she's always going to be at a reach and size disadvantage more often than not, but she does a good job in terms of closing that distance with her speed, her agility, and then obviously her boxing to kind of make people respect her for that. I'm not big on Luana Carolina at all, right? Like I've faded her a couple times successfully, but I think that this is a good spot for her to go out there and take another L, man. I do like Molly McCann. I'm not a big Molly McCann guy myself. I look to fade her as well. Both of these women, I look to fade, and more often than not, it's successfully. With Molly McCann, faded her with Lara Procopio, who's just way better of a fighter than Luana Carolina in terms of going out there and establishing her game plan, which is just aggressiveness. Go out right off the bat, stay aggressive, stay in your opponent's face, pressure them, and then look for those takedowns. And she was able to land those takedowns. And with her black belt, she was able to maintain that top position and get that decision victory. There was one sweaty moment where Molly McCann did throw up an armbar, and I was just like, oh, God, of course, a black belt is going to get armbarred by fucking Molly McCann in this spot, which I'm not like, I was impressed that Molly McCann was able to get that up. And I think if she gets that up here against Luana Carolina, she could possibly take that arm home with her. Molly McCann via submission is currently sitting at plus 1,200 on certain spots. I think is worth a little bit of a dabble if Luana Carolina is the one that ends up going for the takedowns here, which she could possibly get. I'm just not sold on her top control and her ability to hold McCann down. So I could see a scenario where McCann actually throws up some sort of submission and gets it. But I do think this fight is going to hit the over. I do think that we're going to see McCann get the better of the striking. The roar of the crowd is obviously going to help her as well. Anytime she closes the distance and gets any offense off, the crowd is going to be going nuts and just doing nothing whenever Luana Carolina throws anything and lands anything. Even if Molly McCann misses by a mile, the crowd is going to go nuts, and that's going to have an impact on the judges in the spot. So I get the steam coming in on Molly McCann. Personally, I got in on her money line a little bit earlier around that minus 120 range, but I do think she wins this fight via decision, which may be the best prop to take here, plus 110. I don't mind that. Obviously, heavy chalk on the fight goes to decision at minus 300. The only thing that keeps me away from that is the possible armbar from guard situation that could possibly happen from either side here. I think it's more live on the McCann side than it is the Luana Carolina side, but I do see this fight going to a decision more often than not. I do lean with the hometown favorite as well in Molly McCann, like I said, via decision. How do you see this one? Am I talking up Molly McCann a little bit too much? Or
no. I think it's a good fight for her, honestly. Like, I thought Ji Yoon Kim was a more challenging fight stylistically for Molly than Luana Carolina is. Kim, at least, she's big, she's long like Carolina, but she actually can box and she can maintain distance. And that's a tough matchup for McCann, who tends to not be the best defensive fighter ever. But Carolina, at distance, she is not very good at all. She's very easy to get inside on. And like, I kind of expect, first of all, McCann's output's just a lot higher than her. She's going to throw a lot more. She's the much better boxer. She should be winning boxing exchanges all fight. Honestly, Carolina's a bet. Poliana Botelho was taking her down and controlling her. Like, Molly should be able to get takedowns here if she wants them, if we're being honest. The only really big concern I have with McCann is I don't think she's the best manager of distance. And if she finds herself stuck in the clinch, that is one place where I think Carolina can have success with like knees and elbows, similar to how she did in the Godinez fight. But, Molly's probably stronger than Godinez is. I wish I had looked at it a bit earlier because I probably would have taken the minus 120. It's just so hard because, like, I don't really rate Carolina's chances of submission that highly. And I think her chances of KO were fairly almost non-existent. And with that being the case, it's just, like, very, very hard for me to imagine her easily winning minutes in this fight. And so, yeah, I mean, I lean Molly here. I think she's clearly the side. And I think decision is, like, it's definitely, if you're playing a prop, the best way to play it, right? So
yeah, I agree. I agree. Glad that we're on the same side there. All right, let's keep this moving along. Next up, we got the return of Gunnar Nelson. He's taking on Takashi Sato, who's stepping in on short notice for Claudio Silva. Even Takashi Sato been out of the cage for a while now. I believe the last time we saw him was November of 2020. But the last time we saw Gunnar Nelson was when he took a loss to to Gilbert Burns back in September of 2019. It really looked like he was starting to fan out there, man. He was on a two fight losing streak, 1-3 in his last 4 fights. Obviously picked up that win against Alex Oliveira in the middle of that, which didn't look the greatest, early going. It seemed like Oliveira was having a lot of success early in that fight. Luckily, Gunny was able to get that takedown in the second round and eventually just absolutely destroy him with that one elbow that had him leaking all over the place. I was live for that fight. That was one of the crazy that happened in
Toronto, right?
Yeah, that was a Toronto card. That was one of the craziest things. And again, probably one of my favorite walkout moments as well, with Alex Cowboy Oliveira having that Balado song that he always comes out to. And then right after that, you see Gunnar Nelson come with his stoic, deadpan, fucking, way down we go song, if anybody's ever heard that from Calio. But probably one of the most hilarious walkout situations I've ever seen. But this seems pretty straightforward for Gunnar Nelson, right? He wants to go out there, get this fight to the ground. Takashi Sato, the majority of his losses coming via submission. Fucking Bilal Muhammad's getting a submission over this guy. You got to believe that Gunnar Nelson should be able to do the same thing here. But the couple things that have me scared, obviously his layoff. It's been a long time since we've seen inside the cage. The injury that he had apparently was a rib injury, like an upper rib injury, which affects like his shoulder and his collarbone and all that type of stuff. So that's a little bit of a concern here. But if he comes in even like 75% or 80% of what we've seen from him in the past, he should be able to land takedowns here. His karate style of striking should keep him safe, because that's kind of what Sato uses as well. Sato, more often than not, kind of leans on his knockout power more than anything. That's how you normally see him getting his finishes. Sato by KO is currently sitting at plus 700. So if you think that you're going to see tremendous ring rust on Gunnar Nelson, maybe taking a hedge on that at plus 700, not too bad of an idea. But the fact that we have Gunnar Nelson via submission at minus 120 more than likely tells you how this fight will likely go. So I love Gunnar Nelson's takedowns and his immediate knack for establishing dominant position. Like the guy, as soon as he gets him down, more often than not, you'll see him flow immediately to full mount, or even to get the back of his opponent and eventually find that submission. I like Gunny here. I just can't trust him after such a long layoff, though. One of my favorite fighters. I really thought he would have like championship potential when he made his debut in the UFC way back in the day. But it's really fanned out. But this is a very winnable fight for him. Not to mention the short notice nature for Takashi Sato, having to fly across the world to get to London as well. Not to mention he's been out of the cage a long time himself. Very weird that he decided to take this fight on short notice, whereas you'd expect him to be like, okay, I want a full training camp to get back in there as best as I can. So that's a bit of a red flag on the Sato side. But if you like Sato, you got to believe that the KO is the best way that he gets it done. Plus 700, not too bad. But on the Gunnar Nelson side, he more than likely gets his takedown and he wraps up a neck. Submission minus 120. If you don't want to be too greedy, inside the distance at minus 150, in case he gets the back and just starts pounding on him, that's a possibility as well. But from what we've seen, Gunny likes to go for submissions more from ground and pound. So I completely understand that. Gunny submission. That's kind of what I'd go with. How do you see this one?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same. I kind of think, I mean, Sato's best chance is going to be early, because once the fight, I mean, look, we saw Miguel Baeza go through Sato on the mat, and the reality is, Gunner's just a totally different level of jiu-jitsu. The guy he's very well versed there. The guy grappled with Demian Maia for 3 rounds and didn't get subbed. Now, he did lose that fight handily, but he managed to survive that fight. It's actually kind of hilarious looking at the guys that Gunner's lost to, like Ponzinibbio, Leon Edwards, Gilbert Burns, Maia. Like they have, like he is the epitome of the guy that if you are not on that top level, he's probably going to beat you and smoke you doing it. But if you are there,
sorry, I was at the Damian Maia fight. I believe that was UFC 194, the night that Connor knocked out Aldo. And I was in tears, like with the Gunnar Nelson just keep giving up his back and just can't do anything about it. I think Damian Maia rode his back for like 14 minutes of that fight because it always ended up in that position. Yeah, sorry, continue.
But yeah, and I think Sato falls under that category. Like, could Sato have some success stuffing takedowns early? Yeah, I do, and I think he hits hard enough and he's dangerous enough that him maybe clipping Nelson is probably in play. But I also think that's probably the only way he wins this fight. Eventually the takedown's going to come, and when it does, Gunner's probably going to rip through him here. I just, what I've seen from Sato on the mat against Bilal, against like Franca, against Baeza, now he's fighting Gunnar Nelson. It's like I just can't imagine a scenario where Nelson doesn't just tear through him there. You could bet sub -120. I do like the inside the distance for Nelson to -150, just because the lasting image in my mind from that Oliveira fight is those elbows he threw that split his head open, which were absolutely barbaric and savage. So when it's that close together, you're talking about 30 cents. I'll take the inside the distance just to cover it in case he does something like that here and puts him out. But yeah, I can't really find a good case for Sato other than him clipping him. I guess if you're confident Sato can keep it standing, I'd play it by KO. But yeah, I like Nelson inside the distance.
-250 is what the fight doesn't go to decision is for anybody that likes parlaying those. I think that's a damn good spot to do.
Not horrible, yeah, honestly.
Yeah. All right, let's keep this moving along. We got a couple more fights to go. Next up, we got another hype train trying to pick up his second win inside the UFC. Paddy Pimblett going up against Rodrigo Vargas. In terms of odds, we got -590 as well on the Paddy Pimblett side, +425 on Rodrigo Vargas. UFC knows exactly what they're doing here with this matchup, right? Like that Luigi Vendramini one was a little bit too close for the cash cow that they're hoping to bank on with Paddy here. But luckily, Paddy's durability shows off in that Vendramini fight, comes back and finds his own knockout in the same round that he was able to get the finish, that he got rocked as well. Excuse me. It was funny that he was originally scheduled to fight Jared Gordon, or at least that was the talk of the town, or Jared Gooden, I believe. Jared Gordon.
Jared Gordon.
There you go. He was scheduled, or not scheduled, but at least rumored to be fighting him. That fight didn't transpire because I probably would have put a decent amount on Jared Gordon, knowing that he'd be the underdog in this fight. But he gets Rodrigo Vargas. Pretty plain and simple here. Paddy Pimblett, when he's at his best, he can use his takedowns, which I'm surprised we didn't see more of in that Vendramini fight. Although Vendramini, very good black belt in his own right, maybe that's what kept Paddy from trying to get the takedowns there. But I think that he sees the path here against Vargas. He should be able to get the takedown without much resistance, and then from there, I think he does absolute work from on top. I think he gets Vargas out of there pretty quickly as well. I think again, the UFC knows exactly what they're doing. They tried allowing Rong Zhu to get that same treatment from Rodrigo Vargas, where they kind of fed him Rodrigo Vargas. -250 Rong Zhu was that night, but Rong just not the guy that a lot of people expected him to be, right? He's very timid in terms of his output in that fight against Vargas, which is why Vargas was able to get out ahead of him. But whenever Rong wanted to get this fight to the ground, it seemed like he could do it without much issue. And I'm expecting the same thing here for Paddy Pimblett. I'm hoping that it's not like he's obligated to go out there and give the fans a slugfest because he's fighting in front of them. For him, it should be, let's just go out there, get this fight to the ground, and give the fans a quick finish, because that's more than likely what he should be able to get in this spot. So again, -590, never really that great to advise betting that type of line. Maybe the under 1.5 at -130. I could see that being a good spot for Paddy to get a quick finish. Paddy inside the distance currently sitting at -200. Again, another squash match type of odds there for the inside the distance, but it makes sense. I'm just a little bit questioning whether I should be taking Pimblett by submission at +180 or Pimblett by KO at +140, because he could go for both, right? He could absolutely smash from on top, or he could eventually find that choke as well. I can't come up with a good enough reason to back Rodrigo Vargas here, because I'm one of the first guys that's going to be like bad against Paddy. I don't think he's as good as his hype as making him out to be, and I think that Barstool is unfortunately going to be kicking themselves after he starts taking a couple L's. But yeah, I like Paddy to win this fight. I think he wins inside the distance. I'd say under 1.5 is probably the best way to go about it, because I'm expecting him to go out there and wanting to get this done ASAP, try to get that crowd to go into a frenzy, and just have another picturesque moment for his post-fight interview, which was fucking hilarious last time around. But yeah, I like Paddy. Think he runs to Vargas. I'm hoping that you're agreeing with me here, Mr. Dog Whisperer. Yeah. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I bet Vargas big against Rong. This is not That's wrong though. And look, I don't really rate Patty to be honest. Jared Gordon, I don't think people realize it, with 30 to 26, this guy with pretty much zero issue.
Don't tell him yet, John. Don't tell him yet.
I know.
They don't want to hear
tell
that.
them and they hopefully book it. To be honest, this almost makes the fade down the road even better. Look, the bottom line is Vargas is a tough guy. He's a tough Mexican dude. He can take a shot. He'll go in there and throw in the pocket if you let him. The guy can't grapple up. He has bad takedown defense. When he's ended up on the mat, he just doesn't know how to get up. You saw the fight with Alex De Silva, and I like Alex De Silva, but De Silva's not an elite submission grappler by any means, and he was basically able to just ride him out on the mat for loads and loads and loads of time in that fight. And he's just dealing with another level of submission grappler here in Pimblett. Patty, if he's smart, look, I've seen some people say, oh, maybe Patty's excited, he's going to come out and strike with him. Patty's a nutcase if he does that. That would be how Vargas wins the fight, is if Patty does that. But I don't think Patty's a great wrestler, but I don't think he needs to be here. And that's the thing. It's like, I think he's going to get the takedowns if he goes for them. And once he's there, he's probably the most dangerous submission grappler Vargas has ever fought. I expect him to be able to get to the back pretty easily here. I'm kind of perplexed. Books are lining KO closer than submission. That I know he has like 2 finishes via ground and pound in his career, but I don't really think Vargas is going to get pounded out on the mat, to be honest. He'll move if you're throwing ground and pound on him, and so it's like, I actually think a sneaky bet is not Patty. If you have a book that offers not Patty by KO at minus 170, isn't bad. The other side of that is I mean, look, it sounds square, but it's just like I think Patty winning this by submission is by far the most likely outcome of this fight. So I would take the plus 200 there. And to be honest, if you don't think Patty is likely to sub it, then take the goes the distance at plus 200, right? Because if Patty doesn't sub him, I think Vargas will survive. I think Patty really, I would say the vast majority of that sub equity is going to be in round 1. So I think kind of tying it to round 1, which, I mean, what is sub round 1? Plus 300, that's not much better than regular submission. Yeah, but also, I kind of think if he doesn't get him out of there in round 1, it probably goes the distance, right? If Vargas can hang while he's dry, he's probably going to survive takedowns in 2 and 3, I think. But yeah, I would take Patty sub.
I like it. And again, there's no Patty hate here. It's just more so we think that he's a little bit.
I just don't think he's very good.
Yeah, exactly. I think that he's fun for the sport. He's a great entertainer. He brings eyeballs to the sport. I'm completely on board with that. But I just think that people are taking that and comparing it to his fighting skill, which I just don't think matches up with his high level.
Bro, he got 50-45 by Nad Narimani in a fight that was all grappling. That happened, believe it or not.
Dude, the funniest part about that was that he had declined a UFC contract before that fight because he said, I want to prove to you guys that I'm worth more money. And then he loses the Nad Narimani fight. Goes out there, gets another win, gets another contract offer from the UFC and says, nope, let me go prove it once again to you guys that I'm the shit. Loses to Soren back. And then takes a bunch of time off, wins 2 fights against nobodies. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll take the contract now. Guys. We'll see how it goes. But again, I like the kid. I think he's fun to watch. He's great for the sport.
He is fun.
Yeah, and I'm hoping nothing but the best for him. But if you give me legit dog money on Jared Gordon against him in the future, I'm taking the dog money.
Yeah. I mean, I wish he was very good, to be honest, because his kind of personality is exciting for the sport. I just don't see it personally.
Yeah. We'll see. Maybe we're wrong. All right. Co-main event time. Getting a lot of talk on the timelines here between Arnold Allen and Dan Hooker. Minus 115 on Allen, minus 105 on Dan Hooker. Money coming in on Allen. I'm seeing minus 120 at certain spots. And I don't really get it. I got in on Dan Hooker a little bit earlier this week at minus 111-ish. I thought more money would come in on Hooker. He has the name value here. He's a more proven fighter, going out there and, just look at his resume. The guy's just going out there and fighting every fucking buddy and having good success against most of them as well. Whereas Arnold Allen, 8 fights in 7 years, not really that active. Got a win over Sodiq Yusuff, which, was largely an inactive fight outside of Allen dropping him, I believe, once in the first round and once in the second round. He lost the third round, in my opinion, because Sodiq knew he was down. So he was pretty much marching him down the entire time. But, there's fights that are really concerning for Arnold Allen, where he just wins them by a hair. And I think if you're going to have that type of fight here against Dan Hooker, you're in for trouble, man, because Dan Hooker, he throws volume. He uses his even at 155, he was a pretty big guy. Even at 145, he's going to be even bigger. And he uses his size very well against some of his opponents in terms of kind of overpowering them in the clinch or even just going for takedowns of his own. His takedown defense is very good. You wouldn't, obviously get that from the Islam Makhachev fight, but again, it's fucking Islam Makhachev. But Dan Hooker has great hips. He has great awareness for takedowns coming. So I'd be surprised if Arnold Allen is successful with that type of approach here. And then in the striking, man, I think Hooker will do a good job in terms of maintaining distance, putting the volume on him, and just kind of dancing circles around him. The big cage as well helps him to kind of use as much real estate as possible there. And I think that we'll see him, have a classic Dan Hooker performance. I get it. Arnold Allen is 17-1, and he's looked nothing short of legit in most of his UFC fights. But I think that this is a big step up from him, from Sodiq Yusuff to Dan Hooker. Completely different stylistic matchups, but also very different in terms of level of competition as well. This is going to be a big test for Arnold Allen. 2019 or 2018, Gilbert Melendez is nothing to really take too much stock from. Having a close-ish fight with Nick Lentz, not the greatest look either, even though he still gets his win there. And then beating Sodiq Yusuff the way that he did, all he did was land 2 knockdowns in that fight. I see a lot of people saying, the chin of Dan Hooker is a bit of a concern. I think that's being overblown to a certain extent as well, because Arnold Allen, not really a crazy knockout puncher, right? The guy goes out there, and the last time he's gotten a knockout win was 2014 in Cage Warriors. He's recorded 3 knockdowns inside the UFC. Okay, great, but he hasn't finished any of them. Dan Hooker is not going clean out from any of these crazy strikes. Obviously, Michael Chandler is going to send you to the moon. I completely understand that. But are you trying to tell me that Arnold Allen has the same knockout power that Michael Chandler does? I wouldn't say so. So I do like the Dan Hooker side here. I will give this to Allen. Very durable, right? He's taking some shots. He keeps on coming forward. I'd be surprised if Dan Hooker puts him out. So Hooker via decision is probably the prop that I'd go with, which is currently sitting on plus 200, plus 225 on certain spots. But even his money line, let's not get crazy with it. I know this is the propping you up show, but the money line at near even money is a steal in my opinion. So, again, this is a prop show. At the end of the day, decision is probably how I'd go about this one. How do you see this one going down?
Yeah, unless Hooker.
Sorry, John. One last thing I want to say. I'm seeing a lot of people give him shit about the 100 cut to 145 pounds and saying, "Oh, look how he looks right now." You guys have no idea how much weight most of these fighters cut on weigh-in day, just because it's not documented.
15 pounds the night before.
Yeah, exactly. Usually. Yeah, exactly. It's not like it doesn't have as much of a scope on it because Dan Hooker's obviously going back down a division now here. But there's so many fighters that cut like 20 pounds of weight in a week. It is ridiculous how much attention that is getting. I think it's a non-factor, and if you're basing this fight solely off of that, you're gonna be disappointed come fight night because Dan Hooker is gonna go out there and still fight the way that he fights.
Yeah, go ahead, I don't think people realize that guys that need to cut 30 pounds and they come into camp, they don't go 8 weeks of camp and come into fight week 5 pounds away from weight. They usually go 8 weeks of camp and come into fight week 20 pounds away from weight and fight the night before weigh-ins 14 pounds away. That's pretty standard, it's not that uncommon. But yeah, I mean, look, Dan Hooker, unless he's badly compromised, and let's just talk about it right out the gate. Look, the guy he's had more fights at 145 pounds in his career than he has at 155 pounds. I've seen people oh, well, maybe, the weight is why, he got better at 155. It's or it's because he went to 155 when he was 26 and getting better. That seems to be the far more likely scenario, and it's the guy's never been dropped at 145 pounds. The only guy to KO, and look, he went to war with Dustin Poirier and didn't get dropped. The only guy to KO him is Michael Chandler, who is a huge hitter. I'm not really worried about his durability here. Maybe I'll be wrong, but guess what? Not a single person who's saying, oh, the weight cut, can actually say for sure that it's going to have any impact on this fight. It's baseless speculation when the actual data that we have suggests that he can fight at 145 pounds. Anyway, with that out of the way, I think he's going to kill Arnold Allen, to be honest. I think I don't understand this line. I think it is crazy. I've seen 70% of Tapologies picking Arnold Allen. Everybody's betting Arnold Allen this week. He's legit. He's the truth. It's okay. The guy would have lost to Sodiq Yusuff if he didn't drop him twice. He touched on. He got out-attempted by Nick Lentz. Nick Lentz was walking this dude down and took a round off him striking. He only outlanded Jordan Rinaldi at distance by 6 strikes. Look, I'm not saying he's bad. He's a slick boxer. He's a technical boxer. He uses the back. He can fight on the back foot better than a lot of the guys Hooker's fought in the past. No question about it. But the reality is he's very low volume. He lets guys get off strikes on him constantly. he doesn't. The Sadiq win's impressive, but actually maybe a little less impressive after Alex Caceres was boxing up Sadiq in the pocket last week. to be honest with you, but it's just like what I've seen from Allen doesn't scream to me top 5, 8, 10 fighter. I just haven't seen. He hasn't fought a particularly hard schedule in the UFC. Sadiq's the toughest fight he had, and he lost the majority of minutes in that fight. And yet the only fight that he's really put a huge stamp on is Gilbert Melendez, who was ancient at that point in his career. And so it's like I have a guy in Allen who's a slick technical boxer, but he's letting guys who would be plus 500 against Hooker hang in fights and almost beat him. And now we have Dan Hooker, who, look, he's not as technical as Allen, but first of all, Arnold Allen's always used to being able to control range and being bigger. He's going to be giving up 5 inches of height and 5 inches of reach in this fight. He's never had to deal with that before. He's fighting a guy with Hooker who is going to pressure him and is going to throw a ton of output. Hooker is very reliable to keep a pace. He's going to throw kicks, and the body's going to be open there for him. Hooker's a lot stronger than he is. He's going to be able to have success in the clinch here. If you want to talk about who's got the higher chance to KO, Hooker is a serious hitter. Allen, like you pointed out, he's got a couple knockdowns, but also look at the guys he's knocked down. He clipped Sadiq, but Sadiq's been hurt by a lot of guys, He's not putting anybody away. I feel very confident saying Hooker is going to be landing the harder shots here. I feel very confident saying he's going to be landing a lot more shots here. And another thing to talk about, and you kind of touched on it, it's like I mentioned this with Ulanbekov and Elliott. When you see guys perform at a certain level, that performance generally doesn't spike up when they also go up a level. If anything, it regresses down. I don't really see how this can be an even fight, or frankly, how Hooker can be under like minus 180, minus 200, unless Allen massively outperforms his history to date here. And expecting him to outperform the way he's performed against Nick Lentz and Sadiq Youssef against Dan Hooker just doesn't seem right. Like, I get Hooker's lost 3 of 4, but look at the guys he's losing to. If he had fought Dustin Poirier over a 3-round fight, he would have won that fight unanimously. Dustin Poirier, also southpaw, who is a lot better than Arnold Allen is. The guy beat Paul Felder over 5 rounds. He just beat Nasrat. I'm not really sure Allen's better than Nasrat, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I maybe he is, but, at least, Nasrat's been tested a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. And then, could Allen grapple Hooker? Maybe, but the only guy to really maul Hooker on the mat is Islam. Like, Gilbert Burns struggled to grapple Hooker. I don't see it, man. I really think this is just a different level than anything Allen's experienced before. I really think unless Hooker's badly compromised, and again, I don't really think that's an assumption that you can make. I think he should handle him. I honestly do. I think this is kind of nutty. I know that people are like, watch out for the British judges. Guys, if he outlands him 100 to 50, the British judges aren't going to matter. Like that's I really like. I'm big on Hooker at minus 110. I'm going to like full max it if he gets out to plus 120. It's my most convicted play in a while. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If he's compromised, he's compromised. In terms of prop, look, I agree with you. You don't need a prop to bet Hooker, but also decision plus 250 is probably crazy. Allen seems like a durable guy. Maybe take a poke at that, but I think Hooker's going to roll here.
And I'm a guy that likes Allen, right? I've bet on him in the past. I bet on him against Sadiq Youssef, took the money there.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that this is a good matchup for him, especially on the one of the points that you touched on. He's not a high volume guy. He's quite low volume. And how are you going to be able to win judges' decisions unless you record a knockdown, unless you record a knockout or something like that? Hooker's going to be up on him on numbers easily. Like, it's going to be too tough for Allen to come back the longer that this fight goes, in my opinion. So that's kind of the difference here. I'm seeing comments about Allen being the faster fighter here. The only thing that, the only thing that will benefit is if he's able to get the knockdown or the knockout here. Otherwise, speed won't mean anything here because he's going to be eating all the damage and all the volume and the output from Hooker.
It's like 41-year-old Nick Lentz, who was really slow, was closing distance and landing on him. Like, Nick Lentz was able to keep striking competitive in that fight. Do you really think Hooker, who is so much bigger than Nick Lentz and so much better, isn't going to be able to? To me, it's just like I've seen nothing for me that suggests Allen can play like an Israel Adesanya outside type game here. It's just I haven't seen it. So
yeah. Again, I see the whole hometown kind of argument as well if this just goes to the judges, but I think we laid it out pretty well. I don't think it's going to be that close. Like, sure, maybe in the Molly McCann and Luana Carolina fight, and if you're backing Carolina, it could be a concern because that could play a closer. I don't see this one playing out close, especially if Hooker is able to get off on the volume that he normally gets off on. So yeah, maybe we'll look like idiots come next week, but we'll see how it goes this weekend. I feel like we have a
Feel
pretty
pretty good
solid
that we
case
won't,
for
but
the
we'll
Hooker
see.
side. Yeah. All right. We are about to go over the main event here, but first and foremost, shout out to the 130 live viewers joining us on this Thursday afternoon. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Show my guy John some love as well. Hit him on Twitter at MMA Fox, and then check out his own podcast as well, which comes out every Wednesday evening, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Club and Sub podcast. Him and his boys, they go live every week just to break down the card. Link is in the description below for their channel. Make sure you guys go show some love and hit that channel with the subscribe as well. All right. Let's get to the main event here. We got Alexander Volkov taking on Tom Aspinall, minus 125 on Tom Aspinall, plus 105 the return on Alexander Volkov. I'm gonna do my best to not get heated about this one because I feel like I've just been seeing some stupid ass takes all throughout the week on the Tom Aspinall side of things. I will say this about Tom. He's fast, he's agile, he has some good knockout power, and maybe he can connect on the chin of Volkov and put him out. But if he doesn't, if he gets past round one, we're going to see that completely diminish. The speed is going to go away. The power is going to go away. And Volkov is going to start to take over just as he has in prior 5-round fights. Now, I see people saying, okay, Volkov is not looking like he used to in his last 2 fights. First and foremost, 2 fights ago, he's fighting Cyril Gane, consensus number 2 heavyweight in the division. Maybe number 1 if he had some takedown defense. It's Cyril motherfucking Gane, okay? I'm going to chalk up that out. That's completely fine. I'll live with that loss any day of the week. The Marcin Tybura fight, he won that fight, and people are still detracting from him. Yeah, it wasn't the best Alexander Volkov fight. Yeah, it wasn't the one that we're used to seeing. But I'm going to chalk that up to a blip on the radar. Again, losing to Cyril Gane is losing to Cyril Gane. That has nothing to do with this fight against Tom Aspinall, in my opinion, because Cyril Gane is one of the best at maintaining distance, making fights look not as good, or making fighters look not as good as they actually are, is what it is. The Marcin Tybura one, sure, okay, maybe he lost a little bit of a step, but I think I'm just going to chalk that up to an anomaly. The guy's 33 years old, still can be in his fighting prime and can still go out there and have solid performances. Now he's going up against Tom Aspinall, where the large majority of the win equity on Tom Aspinall is a first-round knockout. My guy Alexander Volkov has only ever been finished by knockout twice in 43 fights at heavyweight. Twice. That is insane. Insane that he's only been stopped twice. One of those coming in the first round against one of the best heavyweights outside of the UFC at that point in time, Vitaly Minakov, in round 1. And his only other loss via knockout, we know it, the last second knockout by Derek Lewis a couple of years ago, where I had to unfortunately rip up my lock of the night ticket on Alexander Volkov that night. But if he continues to show what he has shown in the past, which is being very difficult to blitz in on, very difficult to close that range against, and very difficult to land that big shot on, Tom Aspinall is going to struggle here. And okay, he took down Andrei Arlovski and submitted him in the second round. That was like one of the more flash in the pan types of submissions we've ever seen. Credit to him for having the fight IQ to go for the submission and that transition. But Andrei Arlovski did nothing to fight that choke. Literally tapped as soon as the guy got his arm around his neck. We're going to see way more fight out of Alexander Volkov in that type of situation. And I'd even be surprised if we ever see him in that type of situation. Now, the only other guys to have crazy grappling success as of recently against Alexander Volkov was Curtis Blades. You telling me Tom Aspinall has wrestling like Curtis Blades? No. Is that what you're telling me? John, I told you I'm trying not to get fired up about this breakdown, but I just have to. We see this time and time again where we have a prospect that comes out and starts starching dudes, and then once he gets a legitimate step up in competition, he falls short. That's where I exactly believe that this is. Alexander Volkov is not washed. He's not on a crazy decline. If you show me 2 fights, 3 fights in a row of him on a decline, I'll accept it. But the fact that he's on a 2-fight losing streak, and he had that fight against Cyril Gane 2 fights ago where he lost against one of the best heavyweights of all time. I'm not saying that's a decline. I'm just saying that he wasn't the better fighter that night. The Tybura fight still didn't look the greatest, but still won the fight. Still dug in deep in that third round, won that third round when there was easily 1-1 going into that third round. I think we see Volkov handle that first round of whatever Aspinall is going to throw at him, and then start taking over in round 2, start taking even more over in round 3, and possibly find that finish by the ending of round 3, early round 4. I don't think Aspinall has the gas tank to go like that. One other thing I want to point out about Aspinall, go back and watch that Andrei Arlovski fight. It was closer than people are making it out to be.
Yeah.
He hurt him in that second or midway through that first round, couldn't put him away. And hey, Andre Arlovsky is supposed to be chinny as hell. Why couldn't he knock out Andre Arlovsky in that first round? Right? That the whole consensus has always been Andre Arlovsky is one of the chinniest guys in the division. And hard hitting Tom Aspinall couldn't put him out. He hurt him, but couldn't put him out. And then after that exchange, you see him push up Andre Arlovsky against the cage and just hold on to him for like a minute and a half.
His hands on the hips in the third round,
hands
in the second round.
on the hips going into the second round. But even in that first round, holding up Andre Arlovsky against the cage, trying to get his breath back, trying to get his cardio back. If he finds Alexander Volkov in that same situation, Volkov's not letting him rest there. Volkov's digging knees to the bodies. Volkov's digging underhooks, getting out of that position and noticing that there's blood in the water, and he's going to go right after it and get that finish himself. So there's two ways that I'm playing this fight. Money line Alexander Volkov. That is a no-brainer. I'm waiting on the opportunity to see where that line peaks. I saw plus 113 the other day. It's back down to plus 108 on Pinnacle. I think that we're still going to see more love on Tom Aspinall coming in because I am still seeing other people, even guys that I respect on the Tom Aspinall side, which I just don't really understand. Either way, I'm playing Volkov money line, but I'm also going to play the under 3.5 because I think that it does cover that, possibility that Tom Aspinall is that crazy knockout power kind of guy, and he finds the chin of Volkov, and Volkov is, washed or whatever the fuck we want to call him. That covers that scenario, but it also covers the scenario that I think is going to happen, which is Volkov chopping this guy down, beating him up to the body, similar to what he did to Walt Harris later on in that fight, and then eventually finishing him by that 3.5 round mark. So it covers both angles for me. Either Volkov gets knocked out early and I only take about like a unit, maybe less than a unit loss, or I catch both of those tickets and it's off to red panty night for your boy. So I like Volkov a lot here. Volkov round. Let's take the round props here on Volkov. I wouldn't even mind starting as early as round 2. Volkov round 2 plus 1,200. Volkov round 3 plus 1,600. Volkov round 4 plus 2,200. And I'd be surprised if this hits round 5. I don't even think it hits round 5. But if you want to be that crazy motherfucker, Alexander Volkov round 5 plus 2,800. Volkov via TKO, that's currently sitting at plus 350, which is absolutely atrocious. Good God. And even Volkov inside the distance plus 275. I wish you were going to be on the Tom Aspinall side so we can have a heated debate here, but I know that you're going to be on my side as well here. Please fill in the gaps of where I probably
yeah, I mean, look, I don't even hate Tom Aspinall. I think he's a decent prospect. He's obviously carries good speed for heavyweight, right? He hits pretty hard. He's a good boxer. He's obviously got decent jiu-jitsu. But to date, at least, what he's shown in terms of striking is fairly basic. Arlovsky was able to touch him up pretty good whenever he actually went forward on him. And we've also never really seen him deal with somebody who's going to actually do attritional damage. He's never faced someone who's just going to teep kick him from a position where he can't hit them. He's never faced someone who's going to throw leg kicks at him the way Volkov's going to. He's never fought somebody that's going to put out the kind of volume Volkov's going to in general. And that's kind of the thing for me. You can say he looked bad last fight. He did, but first of all, he's a 33-year-old heavyweight. How many 33-year-old heavyweights go over a cliff? Almost none. Ever. Second of all, he had a kid 5 days earlier. I can tell you guys from experience that will absolutely fuck up the sleep schedule. But seriously, so it's I'm with you on that. It's I need to see him really display that kind of sluggishness for a couple fights in a row to think it's a thing. Look, bottom line, these are fighters. You see guys in the NBA or the MLB or the NFL have a bad game or an off night, and no one really questions it. The MMA guys an off night, it's oh shit, his career might be over. Look out. It's a guy can't come out here and just not look great for a night. Nonetheless, he 30-27 type war no matter what. So it still didn't matter. Now, look, I'd be worried if he comes out like that, but I don't think you can just expect it. Look, Aspinall could take his head off. He's fast. He hits hard. It could happen early in this fight. I don't know how likely I think it is, though. Rewatching the fights with Gane and Harris are both faster than Aspinall is. And Volkov didn't really have a ton of issues reading the head strikes from either of them. He didn't get land on the head much. It's just that Gane's strike diversity is so much more than what he's going to see from Aspinall here. And also Gane just so much quicker on his feet, getting in and out of the pocket. But still, I don't really think Aspinall is going to be able to just blitz him and land kill shots there. I don't think Aspinall is going to be able to find the clinch that easily. And if he does, I'm not sure he's the better clinch fighter. So there's a lot of question marks about Aspinall, period. But what we have seen, I feel like pretty confident saying that Volkov's the better striker, to be honest. I know I've seen people advocate for a live bet, dodge the early Aspinall danger. I just don't think it's a lock that Volkov loses the first round. We haven't seen Aspinall have to deal with somebody who's going to kick him and has a range-based game where he can't touch him. I think Volkov's going to volume him up. I don't really think it's that likely that he gets KO'd. And if he doesn't get KO'd, does Aspinall have a minute-winning style? I didn't really think so against Arlovsky. I feel very confident in saying Volkov's not getting grappled here. Yeah, I don't know. You kind of summed it up, so I don't have a ton to add. I just kind of think, look, the bottom line is I'm betting a guy with 40 fights who's gone 5 rounds multiple times in his career and has fought and competed with the best guys in this division. The dude landed 115 significant strikes over 5 rounds against Cyril Gane. Tom Aspinall is a guy who fought Alan Baudot, will be out of the UFC soon. Jake Collier, look, we all love Jake Collier, but bottom line is Jake Collier.
The smirch, my guy,
is not challenging for a title. Arlovsky's good, but the reality is Volkov would be minus 400 against Arlovsky. Like that's just the reality of where that we get locked. And then Spivak, who, look, he hit him in an elbow and knocked him out. Cool. Bout, I said Arlovsky future Hall of Famer. I agree, but he's 43, dude. The guy's not competing with Alexander Volkov. Like the jump from Artur Arlovsky in 2022 to Alexander Volkov is absolutely fucking insane. Brandon thinks I've never seen an Aspinall fight. Apparently, the 8 minutes of tape on him show remarkable strike diversity.
John, this show's about us. Don't worry. Let the comment section do what they're saying. I respect
either way. I feel pretty good about my read here. I honestly think if he doesn't get nuked out here, he's going to just easily outvolume him, to be honest. It's going to be a multi-unit bet for me. Everybody and their mother are still betting on Tom Aspinall, so it looks like the line's still going up. Hopefully it pushes out to plus 150 on fight day. That would be great. I personally think it should be about minus 125 to minus 150 for Volkov. Like, I'm not saying Volkov should be a big favorite, but I think given the unknowns with Aspinall combined with Volkov's resume and what he's done against real contenders compared to Aspinall kind of shit-stopping a bunch of guys and knocking out or subbing Andrei Arlovsky at this stage in his career, there's really no reason he should be a favorite. It doesn't really make much sense. Like, laying spots like Tom Aspinall here is just how you lose money. Like you said in the beginning, how many guys do we see take this huge step up in competition as favorites and actually pay off their price? It happens from time to time, but often they don't. And again, Aspinall is not a guy that I'm like uber passionate about fading. I think he is talented, but I also think he's just entering a fight here that I don't think he's ready for, really. And I think 5 rounds is a big question for him. Dude, especially at heavyweight, man. It is tough to go 25 minutes at heavyweight. So, yeah, maybe he knocks him out early. But if he doesn't, I think he's going to get owned, to be honest. I like Volkov a good bit. Yeah, terms of a prop, I don't really feel passionate about a prop here, to be honest. I just like the Volkov money line. He's going to be a dog. I don't really have a great read on over or under because so much has to do with, Volkov's not really the kind of guy, if he has you tired, who's going to like bite his mouthpiece and go crazy. He's kind of just going to fight his fight. Maybe that's enough to get Aspinall out of there, but it might not be. He might just go to a decision. I think Aspinall has a good bit more finishing upside than Volkov does personally. But yeah, I just like Volkov straight up here. That's who I would say to bet.
I am fading the gas tank of Aspinall here, which could be a question mark still, right? But I feel like I have enough data to kind of believe that Volkov will be able to cash those round 3 or round 4 tickets as well, especially at the price that we're getting for Volkov. Now, last thing I'll say about this matchup, then we'll get into 3 best prop bets. This is a year where Francis Ngannou won a 5-round decision with wrestling. Okay, let's throw that out there. Anything is possible. Anything is fucking possible. But if Tom Aspinall goes out there and doesn't empty his gas tank in the first round and wins a 25-minute kickboxing matchup against Volkov, I will eat my hat. I'll just throw that. I'll eat my hat if Aspinall is able to outstrike him, how Cyril Gane did against Alexander Volkov. I just don't see it happening. I really don't think so. I think the body work of Volkov is going to catch up to him. Yeah. And I think even if Aspinall doesn't have a crazy cardio issue, he's going to have difficulty dealing with the size and style of Volkov, who is very difficult for a lot of people here. All right. I think we did more than enough justice on our guy Volkov there. Again, I was hoping that you'd be on the Aspinall side so that we can have a legitimate debate, but is what it is.
Hey, look, if Aspinall knocks out Volkov, I'm done fading. If he beats Volkov, I'm done. And that's at the point now. I need to like stop chasing. Look, I faded him with Arlovsky. I'm fading him here. If he beats Volkov, though, then look, I said it. I think he's talented. I will call him legit. I'm not there yet, though.
There you go. And DXJC, I will eat the hat if he wins a 25-minute kickboxing match. That's what I said. 25-minute kickboxing match. Not if he knocks him out in the first round, because again, this is MMA. It could absolutely happen. Maybe Volkov's chin doesn't show up that night, but I have 43 fights worth of data to suggest that his chin will more than likely show up this weekend. All right. Again, I said I was hoping that you'd be on the Aspinall side so that we could have a heated debate. And with me introducing who my guest is going to be for tomorrow's Ultimate Weigh-In show, I can guarantee you that I will not be having that debate because my guy, Clint McLean, aka Diehard MMA, is going to be on the podcast tomorrow. And I know he likes the Volkov side as well. Clint, again, Diehard MMA. We're going to be doing the podcast tomorrow. We are doing our Deadlock podcast tonight. So make sure you guys go check that out on the Deadlock podcast channel. That's where we're just talking more so storylines rather than betting. But we will be talking about betting for UFC London tomorrow. So make sure you guys check us out. 3 p.m. Eastern is when we're going to be going live. All right. Let's get into the 3 best prop bets here. All right. First one. I got Volkov, Aspinall under 3.5. Even money here. Again, Aspinall could maybe find that knockout early in this fight. If not, I think Volkov pieces him up and eventually finds that finish, in his own right, probably by the 4th round, hoping it's early 4th round so we don't have to sweat that under 3.5 too much. Next up, I like the Grundy VAK plus 750. I think that he could wear on Makwan here. I think this fight could go late, and then eventually Makwan a little bit sloppy later in fights. And I feel like Grundy has enough knockout power to take full advantage of that. And I think he could find that knockout plus 750 is just absolutely a crazy line. And lastly, I got Hooker via decision plus 200. Love that spot here. I think he pieces up Allen over 15 minutes, takes home a decision victory. I am not scared about hometown cooking or hometown judging because if this fight goes the way that I believe it's going to go, it's not even going to be close. So I'm not even going to have to worry about that decision line hitting here. All right, John, let's spin it on over to you, brother. Who you got?
Let's do it. Yeah, first off, got Valiev by decision. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think he should be a decent favorite here. I don't really rate him much finishing upside here, so I kind of think a victory for Valiev is pretty tied to decision. I like that. Second fight up, we got the Craig Krylov fight goes the distance. This one could be sweaty, but really, I think if Krylov takes, the path of least resistance, which is an outside striking match, he's not super likely to finish Craig. And even if he takes the mat, Craig's only been subbed 1 time. There's a pretty good chance that Krylov's just going to float on top. I think this should be closer to even money, so I think plus 150, you're getting a decent line here. And last up, we have the Durden and Mokaev fight goes the distance. Look, guys, it's a 125-pound fight. Durden's a better grappler than anyone Mokaev's fought before. Most 125-pound fights don't finish to begin with. I don't really think even if Durden slows down that he's very likely to get taken down and tapped. And I don't really think either guy has tremendous KO upside. So this is something that I think should be priced at closer to like minus 150, minus 185 range. At plus 130, I think it's a great spot to send it.
I love it. Unfortunately, no prop bets for my guy Cody today. He hasn't been able to get back to me on those. So if you guys want to check out his stuff, make sure you guys follow him on Twitter at CJ Slaftik, and he'll have his prop bets posted up for you guys on fight day. All right. I want to keep talking about Aspinall Volkov because I just feel like all this Aspinall love is just ridiculous. But again, I might lose a couple of subscribers and all that shit by the time this fight happens if Aspinall actually goes out there and wins. But yeah. Yes, we are anti-hype train bettors. That's where you make it.
But it's like, folks. It's not even like Volkov's one of the best fighters in the world in the division. Like, it's not like I'm fading him with some bum, It's
not like we're betting Rodrigo Vargas to go out beat Paddy Pimblett. It's not like we're beating fucking Jaya Herbert to go beat Ilia Topuria. We're betting one of the best heavyweights of all time, proven heavyweights of all time, against the guy that could be, first round robust. Essentially, that's what his record indicates. Anytime he's gotten into the second round, he's lost. Although one of them via illegal DQ, but besides the last fight, again, even in that fight, again, I don't want to get into this, John. You're dragging me back into it. I feel like they've heard us suck off Volkov more than enough out. So let's just leave it to the fight to see how it actually goes down. John, I'll give you the platform as always on the back end here to wrap it up. Well, anything you want to plug, my brother?
Yeah, guys, Club and Sub podcast every Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern. We have a good time over there. Check it out. You can find me on Twitter, MMA Fox. If you guys want to chat anytime, hit me up, DM, whatever. I love talking fights. I love talking betting. I'm always around. Other than that, good luck on your bets this weekend. Also, may or may not do a spaces during the fights on Saturday. We'll see. But if so, hop in. If you want to chat, you can do the request. I'll throw you on the stage. So check it out.
There you guys go. A ton of content coming from both of us here for the rest of the week. So make sure you guys go check that shit out. Again, tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, Deadlock Podcast. Me and Clint going to be talking to the biggest storylines that are happening in MMA right now. That's on the Deadlock Podcast channel. Make sure you guys go check that out and subscribe to that. And then tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, Ultimate Wayne Show. Me and Clint going over the fights for you guys one last time, giving our last thoughts, especially after the weigh-ins go down as well. Fight day live chat normally goes down at 1 p.m. Eastern, but that's when the fights are starting. So I think I'm going to go with either a 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. fight day live chat time. So make sure you guys hop on for that. And I'll be doing my Instagram live
Waffles
right
and
after
mimosas?
that as well. No. Coffee,
On the live
cannabis,
chat?
and combat. Coffee, cannabis, and combat, John. You should know this. The Triple C comes out on early fight days with your boy. But yeah, make sure you guys don't get caught napping 1 p.m. Eastern prelim start time on Saturday for this UFC London card. All right, John, appreciate you hopping on as always. Good luck to everybody that's in the chat. This may be a highly debatable fight card. We all may talk shit to each other, but at the end of the day, it's all love. Appreciate everybody checking out the show as always. Whether you're a team Aspinall, whether you're a team Volkov, whether you're a team Allen, whether you're a team Hooker, doesn't matter. Appreciate you guys checking out the show on a weekly basis. Because if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this thing the way that we're doing it. All right. Good luck to everybody. But most importantly, good luck to the Volkov backers. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.